Hey, if it's that easy, why don't you just go out there and do it yourself? Just go.
I'd like to be able to say that sometimes to people.
Welcome to episode 11 of Keeping It Real. I'm your host, Adam Tabaka. Today, we'll talk about creating your dream home with Doug Wright. A native of Oneida, New York, Doug studied economics at Utica College of Syracuse University and has lived in Alexandria for the past 18 and a half years. Doug is the owner of Old Glory Property Construction with 7.5 years of experience building and remodeling some of the most beautiful homes you'll see in Alexandria. Doug does masterful work, and most of the homes that he has flipped or built and sold have closed for a price much higher than the comparable sales would have otherwise suggested. A husband, father to 3 daughters, a huge soccer fan, and a bourbon enthusiast. It's my honor to introduce the one, the only, Doug Wright. Doug, it's great to see you. How are you today?
Good. I'm good, Adam. It's great to see you as well. Thanks for having me on here.
Well, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. So real quick, before we dig into the nuts and bolts of construction and building your dream home, tell us, how did you get started in this line of work?
It's kind of an interesting story. I think it's interesting. I don't have a background in it. I did not have a background in it, I should say. I had an existential crisis, we'll call it, in my early to mid 30s about what I was doing for a career and whether I really wanted to be doing that for another 30 years or whatever it would have been. And it came to a head when I went ahead and with the support of my awesome, wonderful wife and basically quit what I was doing completely and jumped over into flipping homes. So it started, I think my first renovation was pretty simple. It was a lot of paint, windows, refinishing floors, new kitchen, stuff like that. And I just loved it. Like I absolutely 7.5 years later, still love going to work each day. And I could definitely look back and say it's something I always wanted to do. I just took a long time to sort of decide to actually do it.
Cool. And so I'm sure there's a lot of them, but tell us about some of the most common misconceptions that the general public might have about someone in your line of work.
Yeah. So there's 2 that I come across more often than others. The one that I come across more than I'd like to admit is that a lot of people think building a house is easy, or even renovating a house or doing an addition is easy. And a lot of times that comes up when you're going over pricing with somebody for what they want to have built. Case in point, I was talking to a homeowner one time and we were going through the process. They had wanted to do like a 1-story addition, as well as dig out a basement underneath that addition. And when we got to the point in the process where the architect got involved and the architect told the homeowner what the fees just for the architectural plans would be, the response back, and it kind of ended the relationship. The response from the homeowner was, we're just building a box on top of a box. It's not that complicated. It shouldn't cost that much. So that's and that's just one example. I've had that similar conversation, unfortunately, probably once every 4 to 6 months with a homeowner where they think it's just real simple and easy. And I don't know if that's because television has with all the shows about flipping houses and whatnot, I think it's glamorized it and probably made it look a lot more simple than it actually is. The other misconception I think is more of a societal misconception is that blue collar skilled trades are to be looked down upon, which I think is crazy because I know a lot of skilled tradespersons that I work with who make a lot of money and really enjoy what they get to do every day. So I think, again, as a larger society, we need to change the narrative to be that you can get into the trades, you can have a very good life, so to speak, and you don't have to put on a suit every day to be considered successful.
I think those are 2 excellent points. And I think to your point about television, I think it couldn't be more spot on. I'm sure, it's, one of those things where, hey, if it's that easy, why don't you just go out there and do it yourself? Just go.
I'd like to be able to say that sometimes to people, but and believe it or not, that's sometimes the feedback I get is, well, I could just do it myself. And you kind of at that point you have to say, okay, then I can't. This isn't going to work out. I'm not going to be the builder for you, which is totally fine as well.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think, given everything that you do, and you do a lot of things and you personally do them very, very well, what's the most underappreciated aspect of your work and what you do?
Again, now, when you don't do this for a living, you obviously don't know everything that would be involved in it. And I think that is the biggest misconception, is how much has to happen in the background, so to speak, or off-site. So when we're building a house, I always try to set the stage with the homeowners long before we start. And one of that, as we set expectations, one of those things is, look, I as the builder, I as the general contractor, am not going to be at the job site all day, every day. But that does not mean I'm not working towards the completion of this project. The number of phone calls, emails, spreadsheets, plans to be reviewed, it's just piles and piles of that sort of stuff that I have to do every day to see that entire project through, again, to completion. So I think it's like the analogy I like to use, I use a lot of analogies in general. The analogy I like to use is the general contractor or the builder is like a conductor of an orchestra. They have to understand not only what each individual part does, or what each individual instrument does, so to speak, they have to understand how to bring it together, where to put those pieces, and then they're the ones that have to lead the entire, in this case, again, the entire orchestra, we'll call it. So it's a lot like that. And I think people then look at that conductor sometimes and think, well, that's the easy job. They're just up there waving their hands. But again, a lot goes into building up to that moment. And that's, I think, a misconception people have. And I personally don't get out there and swing a hammer all that often. Every once in a while I do, but it's really a lot of time spent, again, offsite, or even in my truck. I tell people my office is my front seat of my truck, because that's where I'm often doing these things from.
Oh, that makes sense. And I would imagine that if any one piece gets delayed, there's just a huge cascade effect.
Yeah, cadence is extremely important, and cadence of activities on a job site have always been important, and it's even, I'd say, more important now, or much more stressful now, with the way that our supply chain has been disrupted with labor shortages, and it's obviously affecting lots of different industries, not just construction, but certainly within construction. We used to, I'll give it one example. We used to place a window order for a house. So we might be getting 50 to 60 windows for a house. And we used to be able to place that order generally within 4 weeks of needing them, which means, at that point, you're going to be ready in 4 weeks. Now you got manufacturers that are requesting 15, 18, 20 weeks lead time. And that's stressful, and that's really hard to predict. And to your point, Adam, and again, to stay on the window example, you get to a point where you need your windows in because you need to make the house watertight. And there are things you can continue to do without being watertight, but at some point you could come to a complete stop. And I could use the same example on kitchen cabinets right now, that huge lead times on kitchen cabinets, lead times on there's a lot of plumbing fixtures now that are no longer readily available. I'm talking faucets, things that we think are easy to get, simple. They're just, it's causing a major disruption in the whole way the whole system works right now.
I can only imagine it's got to be creating some headaches for you.
It does. Yeah, certainly does.
Now, so in a city like Alexandria, where you work, where you're based out of, there's only a few buildable vacant lots left anywhere. How can someone take advantage of what we have existing in the housing inventory to create their dream home?
Yeah. So I don't know where your audience is based geographically, but if we're let's talk specifically about Alexandria, Virginia. So if I remember this correctly, I made a note over here somewhere. Our population density is around 10,000 people per square mile, which, if I'm not mistaken, makes us the most densely populated city in the Commonwealth of Virginia. As you know, as a realtor, and you live here as well, there's not a lot of dirt left to be built on, so to speak. So if you're going to go to someplace further out, let's say into Fairfax County or Prince William County, Virginia, there are still a good amount of land that you could build a house from scratch, build a house on virgin soil that's never been built on before. But that's just not something that happens in Alexandria very often. So if you were to want to do that, you could definitely buy a house that's already existing and tear it down to the ground and dig out a hole and build brand new. What I've found success in doing is buying properties in the city of Alexandria and not completely tearing them down, but leaving, let's say, the foundation and or 2 to 4 of the exterior walls, or some of the exterior walls, building up on top of that and or building out. So we're talking additions going up and additions going out as well. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in the market, including currently. I see houses daily, if not, several times a week when you all update your listings that are ripe for that type of opportunity. And the reason I don't think it gets done as much as it could be done is it takes vision. It takes vision. It's one thing to see a vacant piece of land and have an architect draw something and you say, that's awesome, that's what I want. It's another thing to see an existing house and understand what it could become in the future. So yeah, I see that. And that's what I specialize in at this point. And I'm as an investor, I'm doing spec builds on my own. And those are the type of properties I'm seeking out, because I try really hard to work exclusively in the city of Alexandria because I live here and I like being here.
Well, sure. And once you learn the process of dealing with the city, it's a whole nother process trying to deal with another city, another county.
They're all different. They're all the same, but they are all, the systems are, I'd venture to say, radically different in how they need to be processed. And that's a whole nother, behind the scenes thing that we have to do as a builder.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying about having the right vision is really, really critical, because from what I've seen, I've been in some homes that were, older homes, been built out, and some of them, it's amazing. It's really cool the way that they've been designed. The additions have been built out. And then there are some where you sit there and scratch your head and just wonder what the thought process was. You guess maybe it was just the owner just said, no, I'm going to design it and we're going to do it this way. But it's interesting, kind of the whole cross section of what you see.
It is. And I echo the same sentiments. So, yeah, I never criticize someone else's work when I'm there with, say, a homeowner, because you don't know what happened back then or why they made those decisions. But it definitely takes vision and the ability to at least understand that we could do something much different than what you might see sitting on a piece of dirt right now.
Sure. So for someone who's considering a major remodel or adding an addition to their home, should they be talking to a builder first or an architect first? What's kind of the best way to go about the process?
In my opinion, I like to go with the idea of builder first. And I know that seems self-serving, but I'll give you another actual real world examples of this. So my company is not a design build firm. I don't have a full-time staff or full-time employee that does the design portion of it. There are a bunch of building firms that do that. And there's, I think, some pros to that. And that is you can have the architect and the builder involved from the get-go. I think there's some cons to that setup as well. But what I do is I'm happy to refer people to architects. This is the issue I have with not doing the builder first approach. I'd say, again, probably every 3 to 4 months, I get a set of building plans presented to me by a really excited homeowner who has at that point probably spent between $25,000 and $45,000 to get these plans put together. And they come to someone like me and they say, hey, this is what we want to build. We would like to consider working with you. How much is it going to cost? And most often, the budget they gave the architect is not going to actually work for the builder. Case in point, seems like we'll get a lot of these coming to me where one of them, the homeowners they told the architect their budget was $750,000. And the architect told them that that's what was going to be designed. When I got the plans right off the bat with little more than a couple hours of review time, I knew it was going to be pushing over $1 million. And when we got down into the details of everything that the homeowner had spec'd out to be built, it came in closer to 1.2 million. And then I'm the bad guy who has to say, hey, this is going to cost closer to 1.2 million. Now, you can ask 10 builders for a price, you can get 10 different prices. So I'm not saying that there isn't a builder that could do it for their original budget. I think the disconnect that happens is architects, as experienced as they may be, don't generally go out in the field. They don't generally go to the construction site other than to check in or maybe make sure that something is being designed the way that they wanted it. But the reality is they're not dealing with the invoices that come from vendors and subcontractors, and they're not paying for the labor to make it happen. So it seems that's one disconnect. I think the other disconnect is architects are, in my opinion, like artists, and they want to design the coolest thing they can given the parameters laid in front of them. And I think they often over design, for lack of a better term, and they, again, just don't understand what goes into actually making those designs come to fruition. And so by going with a builder first approach, what has worked for me and the homeowners I've worked with that have done this is, if I can come in at the beginning, in the way that I do it is I don't lock anybody in so that I have to be their builder. I do come in with a consulting type of contract to say, I will work with you on an hourly basis or a project fee basis. I will work with you from the beginning as your advocate. And so if they tell me that their budget, again, is $750,000, I want to be able to walk with them and make sure that they stay at or near that budget number. So if it's generally me being the one in the meetings with the architects and the engineers going, oh, hold on a minute. No. If you do that, if you design it that way, we're going to blow our budget. Or, hey, if we can change the design and tweak, the bathroom layout, maybe we can align the plumbing in the house a little bit better and save $10, $20, $30,000, whatever it may be. So by doing that approach, I hope at some point I get hired to be the builder. At the same time, I think saves a lot of headaches and a lot of potential money. Because again, if you're spending $25,000, $35,000, $45,000 on architectural plans, it hurts, I imagine, to get to that point and then realize you can't afford to build what you just had designed.
No, I can only imagine the disappointment. So
now, for what it's worth, I think architects would have a different viewpoint on that, where they would want to be the first ones in. I think my opinion is more taking the collaborative approach. So even like in your case, Adam, as a realtor, I like to say, look, let's get everybody involved. If you want to find a property to do this on, let's get everyone involved as early on as we can and do it as a team approach so that we're all looking out for the homeowner. We're all looking out for the betterment of the situation and not just each individual doing what they feel is best, not having communicated with the others. It's like a team sport.
Sure. And this is, I know things have been really busy for you, for architects. I mean, this is something that people, if they're thinking about, I want to do some work on my house next summer. I mean, they need to start now or
now,
6 months ago, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That's another issue in the general, like, larger conversation of supply chain and labor. Architects, engineers, they're all there's a huge amount of work that they've already taken on. And as you, again, probably know is from what you do for a living, there's a lot of homeowners that are wanting this type of stuff done. And I think we can go back and look at COVID and stay at home periods where we were working a lot of us were working from home. We had spouses or partners working from home and kids at home and dogs at home. And we're all trying to find our own personal space where we can, have calls like this and, not have interruptions. And that led to starting, I think it was June 2020, like my phone started ringing off the hook with people wanting more space. It could have just, some of them were just additions on existing homes. Some of them, they just wanted bigger homes. And that has led to, across, again, the industry, a lot of people wanting those services. And that's making it difficult. I'm running into a lot of situations now where we cannot find architects to take on the projects. Or to your point, you need to get on the list and then you have to wait many months to get in front of them to then have the project designed, it's tough right now because people, like you said, I'm getting calls from people saying, hey, we want to start this project as soon as school lets out in the spring so that we can go away for the summer and come back to the finished house. And the reality is it's too late for that in most cases. And I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer, so to speak. I'd like to be optimistic in looking at this sort of thing, but I don't see that changing anytime in the near future. I don't see the demand for the services of construction changing in the near future around here.
Yeah, no, I don't either. And I don't think that's a Debbie Downer thing. I think that's information that people need to know.
It's a reality. And that's, I think, the other thing to do is to be realistic with homeowners and to how these situations work. It's not because people don't want to take on your project. Actually, that's the other thing I'm hearing. I heard it the other day from some homeowners I've been talking to where they said, we can't even get one of these architects to call us back. And while that is a problem in and of itself, a customer service issue, it's not that the architects don't want to design those projects. It's just they don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
And that's been another builder first, back to the builder first thing. I've had those meetings where I've said, look, your timeline's not going to work. It just isn't. Like, let's be realistic now. And then let's plan a way to make it work for you. But yeah, we're in the end of the year. We're getting into winter. We're getting into the holiday season where people are generally going to be, taking time off. And that's when I tend to take time off. So if we're going to do this, we need to be very realistic about the timelines and not just be hopeful and tell people we can do it when we know we can't.
No, that's good. That's good. Now, what do you think are some of the most important questions that a homeowner or a home buyer who's looking to hire a builder should be asking when they're going out and interviewing prospective builders?
Cool. So I think one question not to ask early on is about pricing. And the reason I say that is, look, this is going to be a huge investment for most people. It might be the biggest investment of their life including the purchase of the home. So it's not that pricing isn't important, but a lot of people come up and say, hey, I want X, Y, and Z done at this house, or I want to build a house that looks kind of like this, or has this square footage. How much is it going to cost? And the answer is, I don't know. Unless you're going to a production builder that builds, one of a handful of floor plans only and knows how much it's going to cost. The fact is, a custom house, you can't really truly price it out until you've spent the money and spent the time getting the plans together. So when people come and say how much, I like to respond with another analogy of, like, if I came up to you and said, how much does a car cost? Like, your answer is going to vary wildly between what does a Honda Civic cost versus what does a Mercedes cost? Like, there's a lot of difference there. And so to just ask how much, the answer, there's not a good answer to give. What I think is more important than price is the relationships. So choosing people that you get along with is just paramount. And I think, again, it's way more important than the price. So when I say people you're involved with, you could have a realtor if you're looking for a property, architects, all the various engineers, the builder. if you're more concerned about price, I think in a lot of cases you're gonna pick the people that can fit those parameters. And what I think a lot of homeowners don't realize up front is to build a house, it's a very long process. And in most cases, from the builder's perspective, the relationship is going to start out at 18 months at a minimum and probably look closer to 24 months. And that includes all the planning, all the permitting, the building, and then what comes after the build. And so it's not just, you don't just, pay the final invoice to the builder and then they're gone out of your life. They're still involved. I'll come back later on, whether it's a week later, a month later, or 6 months later, and we do little punch list items, doors that are misaligned or things have shifted a little bit. Like there's involvement long after the build. And when you don't get along with somebody and you're paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're going to be involved with, again, beyond the actual finish date, they're still going to be in your life. I think, again, to sum that up, the relationship is of the utmost importance over, again, even how much money it's going to cost.
Absolutely. I think that's very sage advice. Now, talk us through kind of briefly, what does the process look like for clients who choose to hire you?
So, like I said, I don't do design build, which again has its own sort of timeline and steps that go along with that. What I typically like to do, first off, if I can get introduced to somebody through a referral, that goes a long way to what I just explained as far as relationships are concerned. So if Adam, you, for example, have a client and you obviously, or I would assume you like that person because you agreed to work with them. If someone like you, and since you and I have a relationship, if someone says, hey, Adam, referred me to you, that goes a long way in starting that process. And in fact, most of my business doesn't come from cold calling, meaning from somebody cold calling me. A lot of it is, hey, we heard about you from a realtor, or you worked at our neighbor's house, or our friends, we love the work you did at our friend's house. The process I like to do is, again, I keep going back to the relationship part. I like to have the initial meeting to start to try to understand whether I think we're all going to get along. So very informal meeting. What is it you want to do? Let's go see the space. Let's talk some very, very big picture, not numbers, but big picture items. And again, I want to understand what you think the timeline's going to be, or not necessarily what you want the timeline to be, but yeah, what you think it's going to be. So I can sort of understand what expectation you have. Assuming that we get along, the next steps I would say, again, to further the relationship part is, hey, I can give you a bunch of referrals to local architects and designers. Let's have you find someone that you get along with. And again, I harp on this with them is don't just pick the person that's the cheapest. Let's pick someone that can understand what your vision is and is sort of aligned with that vision. So if you're wanting a more traditional type of house built, let's not get you signed on with an architect that does mid-century modern as their primary sort of design, or we could do that. We could flip that around the other way. If you want mid-century modern, to be fair, I don't build that type of house, but if you did, let's again align you with people that understand that. So from there, like I mentioned earlier, is I will tell people if you're willing and on board at this point, let's sign a consulting contract where I will consult for you. I will be your advocate. I will be along with you for the ride as you go through the design process. Once that culminates, and that process alone, for what it's worth, that could take 6 months easily. So from the time of the initial meeting with an architect to the time you have what we call a permit ready set of plans, it could be easily 6 months. And that's stretching out even longer now, with, again, the workloads that we all have. From there, I take those plans and I do a very detailed pricing. I call it a pricing exercise, but it leads to a very detailed proposal, broken out into as many as 30 to 40 line items. I should probably double check that. It's somewhere in that range. And then from there, I present that to the homeowners, and we make tweaks to it. We make adjustments as they see things. I like to sit down with the homeowners and spend an hour or two going through the proposal so they can really understand where their money is going and to which component of the build it's going into and why those components cost what they do. Backing up a little bit, during that pricing exercise, I do go out to a number of vendors and subcontractors and I ask them, hey, how much is it going to cost me to get you to do this portion of the build? So it's a very transparent process that I go through. All my numbers are shared with the homeowners. I do have a markup at the end that they see, but all of the individual component numbers are what I'm paying to do that portion. Generally at that point, if we're all still on the same page, and hopefully at this point, because we've been involved since the beginning, our budget is pretty close to what we want it to be. Now, that being said, homeowners always upgrade stuff and always want more expensive stuff than they think they're going to want. But if we're at that point, we can agree on a price, then we move on to actually signing on a contract to build the house or do the addition or do the renovation.
Excellent. No, it's transparency is huge. It goes a long way, because
I agree. Absolutely.
You're dealing with a lot of things that most homeowners, they don't have the slightest clue of what you're doing unless you're showing them and it out there.
Exactly. Yep.
So before we wrap up here, I just wanted to real quickly get a sense, tell us about maybe the most satisfying project that you've worked on recently.
Most satisfying project. So let me go like to a 30,000 foot view for a minute on that question, Adam. And it's extremely satisfying to see the product when it's all done, when you compare it to what you started with. And it's probably vain and conceited of me to say that, because it's the satisfaction you get from seeing the finished product. And because of how I operate, I'm very involved on the job site on a daily basis. So I'm seeing a house. Let's take an existing house that we're going to deconstruct and then reconstruct into something new. I'm seeing it every day. I'm seeing the most minuscule changes that happen. And when you're at that point of detail, oftentimes the changes, you don't see them because you're there all the time watching it happen. So at the very end, when you can literally and figuratively step back and go, this is what we started with, this is what we ended with, it's pretty satisfying to see something. You're taking a house generally in the Alexandria area. Most of our houses were built between the 40s and the 60s. You're taking something in a lot of cases that hasn't been updated. More often than not, these houses have original bathrooms, original 1950s bathrooms that you've now completely changed the layout, how the house looks. It's extremely satisfying. And specifically, again, I don't know if your viewers are all local, but I did recently design, build, and sell a house on Cameron Mills Road at 3705, if I remember the house number correctly. That was a cool project, and that we designed and built and changed that house pretty significantly, and I was really, really happy with the way it came out. In fact, I remember the first day I put the house under contract. It was probably a month or two later that I first walked on to the property with my architect, and his words to me were to the effect of, I don't know what you're going to do with this house. Even he was like, you may have bought something that you can't turn into a gem. Like you may have bought something that we just cannot make look nice. And I said, no, I think if we can get this vision put on paper, we can make it into something wonderful. And that house came out pretty awesome. But again, I'm probably biased, and I'm biased, but if I take into consideration the comments that we got during the period when it was for sale, I'm going to say, yeah, people were pretty happy with the outcome on that one.
You do great work, Doug. Don't worry about being modest here. You really do. So
thank you. I'll owe you $20 for that comment. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, no, it's been great having you on here today. Folks, if you want to reach out and contact Doug, his contact info is going to be below. Doug, thanks so much for being here, and love to have you back again sometime if you're interested in coming back in the future.
Adam, thank you for having me. I always like talking shop, so I'd be happy to get back with you again for another subject here in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right, take care. Thank you.